If you're seeing this, you've made it. Destiny chose this moment, Neville Goddard. There is something sacred about desire. Something misunderstood. Something that doesn't come from lack or need, but from memory, soul memory. We've been conditioned to believe that wanting is weakness. That to desire means you're missing something. That the dream is proof that it isn't here. But Neville Goddard saw deeper. He taught that a desire is not a cry from the void. It's not the voice of the empty self. It is, instead, the echo of completion. He said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not just imagine it. Not just repeat it. Feel it. Breathe it. Let it settle into your body like a truth that's already lived. This is not poetic philosophy. This is how the quantum field works. The universe doesn't organize itself around your effort. It responds to your state, to your frequency. And frequency doesn't lie. You can speak positive words and hold on to fear. You can visualize abundance and still breathe scarcity. And the field, it responds to what you are. True desire doesn't come from the part of you that is still in the past. It comes from the version of you who is already living the future. The one who remembers. The one who has touched what you have not yet touched with your hands, but already feel in your chest. You don't desire because you lack. You desire because something in you has already arrived. And if you're still trying to manifest by convincing yourself that it might happen, then you're still sitting in the frequency of doubt. Because the real signal, the one the universe hears, is certainty. Not mental certainty. Not logical proof. But the quiet, grounded knowing that says, this is already mine. Even before your eyes see it. Even before your world changes. The moment you stop chasing and start being, the shift begins. But being doesn't mean pretending. Being means feeling. Feeling from that place where the longing disappears and the remembering begins. Where you don't beg for a new life, you become the vibration of the life that's already unfolding. You're not dreaming of what could be. Most people don't even notice it. That subtle undercurrent of fear, masked as hope. That quiet tension underneath the affirmation. The anxious grip behind the vision board. It's the silent contradiction that stops everything before it begins. Trying to manifest something while believing, profundament, que você ainda não tem. You may say the right words. Visualize the right outcomes. Repeat the mantras with discipline. But underneath all of that, there's a vibration. And if that vibration is rooted in absence, then the message you're sending into the field is not creation, it's confirmation of lack. Neville was never interested in surface techniques. He spoke of the inner state, the inner knowing. He taught that the outer world is nothing more than a reflection of the inner one. And when you try to get something from the universe, you are already affirming that you don't have it. The field doesn't hear your requests. It feels your frequency. That's why desperation blocks. That's why begging delays. Because energetically, you're reinforcing the identity of someone still waiting, still hoping, still separated from the thing you say you want. And energy doesn't lie. Your logical mind will ask, how do I make this happen? But the deeper question is, how do I become what already is? The shift isn't external. It never was. The shift happens when you stop reaching and start remembering. When you stop trying to bring something into your life and start living as if that reality is already yours. And yes, this sounds impossible when your world shows evidence of the opposite. When the bank account is empty. When the body hurts. When loneliness feels like silence that never ends. But manifestation doesn't start by fixing the world. It starts by shifting the state that perceives the world. You don't need to convince yourself with words. You need to return to the feeling of fullness before the evidence appears. Because energy is not waiting on proof. It's waiting on permission. You can't create a new life with the same self that suffered in the old one. This is the part most people resist. Not because they don't want to change, but because they don't realize how tightly they're holding on to who they used to be. The identity, the story, the pain that became familiar, the fears that became facts. The beliefs passed down like inheritance, silent but heavy. Every time you try to shift your life, but keep thinking, feeling, and reacting like the version of you that was shaped by survival, you're caught in the loop. Wanting the new, but anchored in the old. That's not laziness. That's neurobiology. That's your brain repeating what it knows, because it was trained, often unconsciously, to protect you, not to evolve you. Bruce Lipton explains this well. The subconscious mind is a program. And that program runs your life, even when your conscious mind dreams of something else. You can say, I am abundant, but if your subconscious believes, I always struggle, that deeper frequency dominates. Not because you're broken, but because identity is magnetic. And the field responds to your deepest sense of self, not your goals. The truth is hard, but liberating. The future you want cannot survive inside the identity that keeps replaying the past. You have to die to who you've been. Emotionally, energetically, symbolically, not with force, but with permission. This doesn't mean rejecting your story. It means integrating it, seeing it clearly, honoring the pain, but no longer using it to define you. Because the moment you see yourself as more than what happened to you, your frequency begins to shift. Not as a performance, but as truth. The brain may resist at first. It may pull you back into old thoughts, old habits, old emotions. But every time you feel that pull, and choose presence instead, you weaken the old pattern. You loosen the grip. And the self that once needed protection begins to dissolve, making space for something new. Something more aligned. More alive. You are not your memory. You are the awareness becoming free from it. There is a kind of anxiety that wears a mask. It looks like discipline. It sounds like determination. It even feels like purpose. But underneath it, there is tightness. There is fear. A silent panic that says, if I stop trying, nothing will happen. And that is the very signal that blocks the flow. You may call it focus. But when your focus is laced with urgency, it's no longer presence. It becomes control. And control, in the energy field, is resistance. The quantum doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to coherence. The more you try to force reality, the more it slips from your hands. There is a deep misunderstanding about effort in the spiritual and manifestation world. People believe that if they are not constantly visualizing, constantly meditating, constantly working on their energy, they are failing. But Joe Dispenza teaches us something different. He shows us that true manifestation begins when the nervous system is in coherence. When the heart and brain are no longer at war. When the breath is steady, the body is open, and the emotion becomes the bridge. And this coherence cannot be reached through obsession. Because obsession is not intention, it's survival. It's the old program trying to protect you through hypervigilance. And while it may feel like you're doing the work, what you're really doing is fighting the current. Trying to swim upstream against the flow of what's already being prepared for you. Sometimes, surrender isn't laziness. It's wisdom. Sometimes, stillness isn't weakness. It's alignment. You don't manifest because you're constantly thinking about your desires. You manifest when your body becomes a safe space for those desires to land. And that only happens when the nervous system is relaxed, when the energy field is open, and when your inner state stops contradicting itself. That's why the field listens to coherence, not noise. It listens to the space between your thoughts, to the emotion beneath your words, to the silence after the practice, when you're no longer trying, but simply being. So breathe, deeply, slowly, deliberately. Visualize, yes, but feel. Not with force, but with truth. Not to make something happen, but to remember that it already is. Because when the anxiety quiets, the signal clears. And what was once far, begins to move toward you. Thought is not the source. It's the signal, the shape, the surface. But beneath every thought lives something more ancient, more magnetic, more real, emotion. That silent current moving through your body before the mind has time to name it. Before language. Before logic. That's where manifestation begins, not in the sentence, but in the feeling behind it. Most people try to think their way into a new life. They write the affirmations. They repeat the mantras. They imagine in great detail the version of reality they wish to create. But if the body is still holding fear, if the chest is tight, the breath shallow, the stomach clenched, then the frequency being broadcast is not aligned with the thought. Emotion is frequency. And frequency is what the field responds to not vocabulary. The mind can lie. The voice can perform. But the body always tells the truth. And it's the body that carries the emotion, that emits the signal, that anchors the state. Neville didn't teach positive thinking. He taught inner embodiment. He knew that the state you dwell in, not the words you speak, determines the timeline you enter. So ask yourself, not what you think about your dream, but how you feel about it. Do you feel close to it, or distant? Safe with it, or overwhelmed by it? Do you feel your body relax when you imagine it? Or does something inside you tighten, afraid of disappointment, afraid to believe too much? This is where the work lives, not in perfect visualizations, but in emotional honesty. In allowing yourself to feel what your future would feel like, without needing proof, without needing guarantees. Just the vibration, just the sense of truth, unshaken by external circumstance. The emotion is the bridge. The thought is the direction. But it's your state that carries you there. And a state is not built in the mind. It is felt in the body. It is shaped by your memories, your beliefs, your self-permission. And it changes not by force, but by allowing. By staying with the feeling long enough for it to become your new normal. Not a performance. Not a technique. But a way of being. So if you're not manifesting what you desire, look deeper than your thoughts. Look into your state. Because it's not what you think that creates your world. It's what you feel as already true. We were taught to treat imagination like play, as something reserved for children, a space for fantasy, creativity, distraction. But imagination, real imagination, is not childish. It is sacred. It is magnetic. It is how the invisible becomes visible. Not because you control the outcome, but because you align your entire being with it. Neville Goddard spoke of imagination not as fiction, but as creation. He said, "All that you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow." These are not poetic metaphors. They are instructions. They are keys. You are not here to beg the universe for crumbs of hope. You are here to awaken your innate capacity to become what you seek. And imagination is how that becoming begins. Not with fantasy, but with embodiment, with coherence, with emotional resonance that reaches into the field and says, "This is who I am now." Most people imagine from a distance. They dream of something far away. They visualize outcomes like spectators watching someone else's story. But real creation doesn't happen from the sidelines. It happens when the body believes the vision. When the breath changes, when the chemistry shifts, when the cells begin to respond to an experience that hasn't yet happened, but feels true now. And neuroscience confirms this. The brain does not distinguish between what is experienced and what is vividly imagined with emotional intensity. If your body feels it, the brain fires as if it's real. And when your brain fires, your frequency follows. Your energy becomes the blueprint of a new timeline. And the quantum field responds, not to the future event, but to the present coherence. So no, imagination is not about daydreaming. It's not about escaping this moment. It's about entering it with new frequency, living from what you long for, not toward it. It's about stepping into a version of yourself who is no longer waiting, no longer hoping, but feeling, breathing, trusting, not because it's guaranteed, but because you've stopped requiring proof to know what's already yours. Imagine like it's real, not because you're trying to trick the universe, but because your soul already knows it's true. And when your imagination becomes a felt experience, when it becomes a state of being, the external world no longer has a choice. It must reorganize itself around the frequency you now hold. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. We think we're waiting for the right moment. Waiting for a shift, waiting for the money to come, for the healing to arrive, for the love to appear. We imagine time as a line, where now is small and the future is far. But in the field of energy, in the quantum space where reality responds to frequency, time is not what you were taught. Time is not distance. Time is vibration. This truth, once felt, changes everything. Because you begin to see that what you want is not out there, in the future. It's not slowly approaching, like a train down the tracks. It already exists, now, just vibrating at a frequency you haven't yet stabilized within yourself. You're not waiting for the moment to come. The moment is waiting for you to match it. When your energy aligns with the reality you desire, internally, emotionally, physically, what you thought would take months, years, sometimes unfolds in hours. Because the timeline is not fixed. It bends to coherence. It collapses around consistency. And the moment your state becomes steady, anchored, uninterrupted, the field has no choice but to mirror that back. That's what people call miracles. But they're not magical. They're vibrational mechanics. The mistake we make is thinking that time is the enemy. That waiting is neutral. But waiting, when filled with longing, is resistance. And resistance creates delay. You might not see it that way, but your nervous system feels it. Every time you say, "It hasn't happened yet," your field echoes, "I am still in separation." And separation is the space where timelines stretch out endlessly, never quite arriving. Neville understood this. He knew that the key was not to desire faster results, but to dissolve the very idea of waiting. To enter a state of alreadiness. To feel, now, the emotion of the completed reality. And from that emotion, act. From that coherence, speak. From that truth, embody. Because time, in manifestation, is not measured in days. It's measured in permission. It's measured in how consistently you can feel what is already yours, despite the evidence around you. It's measured in how deeply you can trust your inner state over your outer circumstances. And when that trust becomes your baseline, your normal, your breath, then the field responds. Not later, not someday, but now. Because now is not a moment on a clock. It's a frequency. And frequency always returns home to itself. There's a kind of spirituality that looks beautiful from the outside. It has all the words, all the crystals, all the rituals, the talk of vibrating higher, of being light, of trusting the process. But when you sit in silence with it, when the incense fades and the mantras end, there's a question that echoes from somewhere deeper. Is this real, or is this performance? Because there is a difference. There is a difference between appearing to be in alignment and being in coherence. Between saying the right things and actually feeling safe enough in your nervous system to receive what you've asked for. Between using spiritual language as a way to bypass discomfort and using it as a doorway into deeper truth. Many people are exhausted, not because they aren't doing the work, but because they're performing the work. Trying to look spiritual, trying to feel high vibe, trying to always be grateful, always be surrendered, always be in flow. And in that trying, they disconnect from the very source they seek. The heart knows. It knows when the smile is forced. It knows when the gratitude is rehearsed. It knows when you're repeating words you don't actually feel, just to convince the universe you're ready. But the field doesn't respond to appearances. It doesn't care if your spiritual practice is aesthetic. It responds to the frequency you carry in your silence. When no one's watching, when the mask is off, presence isn't loud. Real alignment isn't always joyful or euphoric. Sometimes it's quiet, heavy, honest. Sometimes it means sitting with grief, feeling the sadness, letting go of the pressure to be okay. And in that surrender, in that raw, messy humanness, your vibration becomes more authentic than any affirmation could ever be. Because authenticity isn't about pretending you're healed. It's about being real enough to admit where it still hurts. So if you feel tired, if you've done all the spiritual things and still feel empty, maybe it's not that you're doing it wrong. Maybe it's that you're not doing it honestly. Maybe what's missing isn't another technique, but the courage to drop the performance and come home to the frequency that's true now, even if it's vulnerable. Because the universe doesn't need your perfection. It needs your presence. And presence begins when you stop trying to vibrate higher and simply become real. There is a version of you that already lives the life you long for. Not in theory, not as a fantasy, but in energetic form, in a timeline where your healing has already occurred, where your clarity is no longer a question, and your abundance is no longer a wish. It's just the way things are. That version of you is not far. It's not a goal to chase. It's a frequency to embody. But to embody it, you must first recognize it. And to recognize it, you must learn to see through a different lens, not the eyes of the present self who doubts and delays, but through the emotional memory of the self who already remembers how it feels to have arrived. That future version of you is not waiting to be created. It is waiting to be invited. And one of the most direct ways to access that invitation is to sit with them, to close your eyes, to breathe, and to write from their voice, not to them but as them. Write a letter from the version of yourself who already crossed the threshold. The version who no longer questions, no longer begs, no longer fears. The version who walks, not in hope, but in gratitude. Not because things are perfect, but because they finally feel true. This exercise isn't symbolic. It's neurological. When you write as your future self, when you give language, rhythm, and breath to the voice of who you're becoming, your brain begins to rewire. Your body begins to shift. Your field begins to respond. And the more often you do it, the more familiar that identity becomes. Not as imagination, but as memory. Because memory isn't only for the past. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between what was and what is emotionally rehearsed with enough intensity. That means you don't need to wait for your reality to change to feel it. You just need to meet the version of yourself who's already living it, and listen. What would they tell you? What would they remind you to stop fearing? How would they invite you to feel, to stand, to breathe? Because that version is not separate from you. They're you. Just without the resistance. Just without the story that says you're not ready. And every time you sit with them, write from them, feel with them, you dissolve the distance. The future stops being a someday and starts becoming now. There's a moment, quiet, undeniable, when you stop searching. Not because you gave up. Not because the dream faded, but because something in you clicked. A deeper knowing, a breath that feels different, a silence that doesn't echo with lack, but holds presence. That moment isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes gently, almost invisibly, and yet, it changes everything. You realize you were never chasing the future. You were remembering it. Because the desire you carried for so long, the one that brought you to this video, that sat in your chest like a weight and a whisper, was never about what you didn't have. It was a message from your soul. A vibration from a version of you who already lived the fulfillment you couldn't yet see. And today, for just a few minutes, you felt that version. Bruce Lipton reminds us that belief is biology. That your cells are listening. That you are not fixed. You are programmable, and more than that, reprogrammable. And the most powerful code your system responds to is not willpower. It's not thought. It's not repetition for the sake of habit. It's the emotional signature of truth. When you feel something as real, your entire field adjusts. Not just your mood, your frequency, your biology, your timeline. That's why you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what you are is not your current reality. It's your current state. The future you thought was far away? It's not. It's here. But it's quiet. It waits, not with impatience, but with faith. Because it already knows. You are becoming the version of yourself who no longer tries to manifest, but embodies manifestation. You no longer beg for change, you breathe change. You no longer hope to align, you realize you already are. The mind may resist this. It will tell you that you need more evidence. That you're not ready. That you still have too much to heal, too much to fix, too much to prove. But the soul doesn't operate by proof. It operates by permission. And right now, you've given yourself permission to remember. To remember that this moment is not random. To remember that this desire was never separate from your destiny. To remember that your readiness is not measured by your perfection, but by your willingness to feel something deeper than your fear. So take this with you, not as a lesson, but as a recognition. You are not here by chance. You are not dreaming by accident. You are remembering what is already yours. And if this video found you, it's because something in the field already recognized you. Already answered. Already confirmed that the future is not coming. It's arriving through you. So stay with this feeling. Not just today, but tomorrow. Not just in meditation, but in the way you drink your coffee. The way you breathe when you wake up. The way you walk into a room, not as someone who's waiting, but as someone who has already crossed the threshold. And if something in you stirred during this video, if something moved, then let it echo outward. Share this with someone who's been holding the same quiet desire. Like this video not to support an algorithm, but to say to the field, I choose this frequency. Subscribe not just to the channel, but to a new level of presence in your own life. Because now, you are no longer seeking signs. You are the sign. You are the signal. And the universe is already listening.